are live on Facebook. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, technology.
Oh, technology.
Love it so much. Hello.
We live?
Yep.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Comic Shop Talk, brought to you by Black Hat Comics in Rockin' Milpitas, your one-stop shop for all things superhero. Shop online at black-cat-comics.com. We're here to connect you to the comic book community. I'm Mark.
I'm Francie.
And we've got a very special guest today.
Emonic. Local
Hey, guys.
artist and illustrator talents mafioso. I don't know what the right word is.
Artist extraordinaire, local convention hero, actually international convention hero, right?
That's right.
Master of many talents. Almost don't even know where to begin. You've got lots of years of experience in all sorts of things. We're going to talk about some art. We're going to talk about your influences. We're, of course, going to talk about comics that you read. And we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, sorry for the delay and the technical difficulties. You know, it happens.
It's an interactive program, folks at home. So throw us your questions, your comments, your concerns, and your queries, and we will respond to the very best of our ability. We're here just to, like I say, have some fun, talk some comics. Usually we start with some comic news, some comic shop stuff, but we're just going to get right into it. We're going to talk about the comics and talk about shop news and blah, blah, blah as we go. Emonic, let's start with, first of all, why don't you just tell the nice folks at home who you are, what you do, what you sell, and where they can buy it.
My name's Emonic, and I am an illustrator artist based here in the Bay Area. I've been doing shows for the past about 14, 15 years, maybe about, working shows. I do a lot of the major shows like Comic-Con, San Diego, WonderCon, a lot of the West Coast shows. I also been known to, I do Phoenix, I do Seattle. I've been to Canada, doing shows there. And people are able to look me up online. You just type in Emonic, E-M-O-N-I-C. I come up right away on Instagram and all the other social networks. I try to just post up material just based off of the stuff that I'm working on in regards to just my artwork and whatnot. You know, if you get the opportunity, you usually find me at one of the major shows on the West Coast here. And I work with galleries, and I work in doing a lot of freelance work over the years is how I've made my career. Also, I've been known to do a lot of live art events as well, working with local artists and events that are here in my area as well as in other places as well, where I've submitted work for other projects. I got my start, I guess, some of my work ended up being, I guess, recognized is when I did the Sandman 20th anniversary show. That's how quite a few people found out about me when I did that back with a gallery down in Alhambra some time ago. Can't remember the gallery's name. I'm still waking up. That's why I've got my coffee here, obviously. And actually, it's obviously, like, for most people, not a lot of conversation with other people. So this is all very well new to me. And generally right now, we are in the thrall of convention season at this point in time for the majority of us. So, like, normally at this time, I'm having like 8 people or having 8 conversations at a table at a convention, doing a number of things. And definitely with everything going on, the gears have changed. And so having a conversation like this is definitely, it feels a little awkward. It shouldn't, but it does for a lot of us. So, but in regards to you know what it is that I work on comics here and there, and I do a lot of illustration design work, and that's how I've primarily made my living, as well as doing comic shows and art shows, and wherever I can fit my work into a project. That's how I've made my living.
So this is typically a really busy season. So how are you keeping yourself busy now that there's no Comic-Con?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the gears have definitely changed in that not having any shows. So there's a lot of artists that like myself that do what we do, and we're kind of having to try to figure out how to work this platform to do what it is that we do and how to present our work in such a way where it feels fresh and we have some type of connection with our audience, because with not having the shows like we normally do. And so for myself, I've just kind of been keeping under myself, to be honest with you. Things have kind of changed drastically in my life. I had one of my family members, my brother, passed away in October, so things kind of changed drastically for me. And I've just been kind of concentrating on myself and on my personal projects of where I want to go and what I want to do. And I'm just kind of looking at what's going on right now in the world and trying to figure out where I fit in all of this. I'm sure like a lot of artists like myself doing what we do, we kind of all feel that way. Mm-hmm. Not having the platform of a convention that we're always prepping for, because ever since I guess for the past like 14, 15 years, as I said, around this time, just after February, end of February, things start to ramp up. And so we could have a convention just about every weekend up until the next fall.
Yeah.
And so things have, obviously changed. And so I'm just kind of working on my personal projects. I'm doing a bunch of commissions. I'm trying to finish up a bunch of commission work. And then I've got 2 projects, actually 3 projects I'm working on that have been getting a little bit more of my attention as of late. But 2 are comic projects, and then one's another personal project. So those have been going to get my attention, and I've been doing commissions for people and then mailing those out, once I can, with everything. But that's what I've been up to.
Those comic projects, anything you can talk about?
Not as of yet. I am working with a writer that whose name is Chris Wisnia. He worked with Sam Keith on Ojo, and he wrote me a script quite some time ago. And so I've been kind of taking more time on tackling that. Also, I know, I guess we can talk about it. And since I'm talking about with you guys, it's working with you guys. We talked about working on projects and doing something very soon. And so that's kind of the thing I'm excited about as well, is working on smaller projects and getting smaller projects and turning them into bigger projects. So that's been exciting in itself, and just having the time in order to do that. I'm not wrestling around of trying to be here and there and situate money in order to do those shows and whatnot. So it's been nice to kind of take a back seat and just kind of, I'm actually okay with not having to do Comic-Con this year. I know it sucks that it's not going to happen. Every year we kind of build up for it, and there's like this anticipation, and there's this lull that's in the air, and it's such a stressful thing in order to set up for. But right now, I think I'm okay. I'm not having to do it right now. I know that there's other people that are talking about trying to have shows really soon, and with everything going on, I'm cool on not doing anything right now. I got asked just recently about doing another show, and I think I'm gonna wait until next year, to be honest.
You were just talking to Joe from Time Tunnel. I'm going to share what he was talking about with shows, the new guidelines and stuff.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with Joe from Time Tunnel about the San Jose Super Toy Show, and I'm speaking out of place here, but he was saying, he's doing the back and forth with the county about the regulations and this and that. Mm-hmm. And there was a number of reasons why he isn't interested in doing shows this year. Part of it is the regulations, and part of it just is everybody's personal safety, personal well-being, and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. He said he has clearance to do a show in October, but he can only sell half as many tables and let in half as many guests. And so he's sort of like, well, there's no point to that, because then the tables make any money, and the people who show up to the event don't have anything to look at.
Yeah.
So yeah, this year it seems to be kind of a wash for the conventions and the sorts of things.
Joe's an amazing guy. He's done a lot of good for a lot of local artists. I'm one of those that have been able to benefit from his shows, and I'm always really appreciative. He's supported me a lot over the years, and I'm always really appreciative of every show that I've done of his. And even though it doesn't necessarily fall in line with his type of material that he sells, he's always been supportive of local artists. So it's really cool to be, in the past to have done those shows and work with him.
Yeah, for sure. We're big supporters of all the local stuff, because that's part of being in comics. It's part of being in anything. So we love to support Joe. We love to support the toy show. We love having you. You're one of our free comic day people.
Yeah.
Black Hat family.
Part of the Black Cat family.
Yeah.
Much like yourself, and much like everybody, like you say, artists, I think everybody in the comic industry, maybe 90% of the world right now, is in a place of reflection and reinvention and analysis and we're all kind of trying to, you put it so well, we're all trying to find a place in the new world. But I look forward to, like I say, getting back to having that kind of interaction. As you say, this time of year, we all get excited about the shows. And so even if they were doing it, I would not be going. But it's still kind of hard to be sitting at home in July.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's not only that, but like I do miss having those conversations with fellow artists and whatnot, and catching up with them, and just having those really good conversations. That I am missing that. But I mean, I do have a few people that check in on me every once in a while, and buddies that'll call me up and just make sure I'm all right and whatnot, and I'm staying sane, which is always nice. So I'm always very appreciative of that.
So we've got a question for you, and it kind of talks about one of the topics we talked about before we logged on. So early influences. Early
influences for me. I want to go ahead and I haven't. A lot of people have heard me talk about my influences quite a bit, but we just recently had Juneteenth, and I'm a minority, and I feel like this is a really good time to maybe talk about this. Is that some of the Black artists that have influenced my work, and one of the major artists for myself that have influenced me is, and what I did was I set up a bunch of books, so I'm gonna be like pulling up a bunch of references.
Yeah, I love show and tell.
Yeah, definitely. So
we'll show it to
I mean, people know the general references for me, if in fact you've met me. But I mean, there's a slew of artists that are, obviously you can see my bookcase back here, and I've got nothing but art books in there, and then I've got more at my other studio. But one of the artists I want to go ahead and talk about is Brian Stelfreeze. And he's responsible for the Black Panther. He's been a really prominent artist since I was in high school. I found out about him through when I was going to Comics and Cards. At that time, the guy that was running it, the manager there, his name was Glenn, and he introduced me to Brian's work. And Brian's work has always been a big staple and reference point for me of going to and looking at structure and looking at watercolor technique. And watching him work is amazing. It's really amazing. I've had the opportunity to talk with him a few times, and I've also been invited to when I'm in the area and I get the chance to go to, I guess they have like art nights where he's at. So I had an opportunity about a year or two to meet him, and I've had a couple of conversations. So he's been one of the influences for me. Also, there's been another artist. His name is Ryan Benjamin. Ryan Benjamin has been a prolific artist in comics. He works on Batman. He's been in, he's done a lot of titles. He's mostly a DC artist. He's did a lot of stuff for Wildstorm starting out. This is his personal book called Pancretia. And if you go on Ryan's website, he has motion comics. And these are the printed adaptions of those motion comics. Ryan's always been a big influence for myself. And knowing him, he's always been a really gracious guy. Another artist that I think is really cool, he kind of goes between comics and animation. His name's LaShawn Thomas. And LaShawn, he is actually responsible for the Boondock series, the animated series.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he actually, helped redesign Aaron Magruder's artwork for the series, and he also has a series on Netflix right now, an animated series called Cannon Busters. It originally was a comic book through Image years ago, and he went in and adapted it. And he's also worked on Legend of Korra. And the big thing about LaShawn is that he is the first American artist to go to Korea and learn how animation is done. A lot of our animation is sent over to Korea and done because it's a lot cheaper. And he didn't know anything at all about Korea or anything like that, but he wanted to learn and he just jumped in. And he talks a lot about it. You can find out about LaShawn's work online and stuff. But he's a really, really awesome artist. Another buddy of mine who was big when I was first starting out, that was an influence on me doing live art. He is his name is Dave Croslin, and I have a bunch of artwork, but I just have this right here. This is one of the comics he worked on Everybody's Dead through IDW, and he also is responsible for the Invader Zim covers that are coming out right now. Mm-hmm. So he also works he works for Titmouse. I don't necessarily. I think he does storyboarding for Titmouse on some of their animation stuff through Titmouse. But Dave Croslin, he's an amazing artist. He also did the adaptation for Scarface through, I think it was through Oni when they did it years ago. So he's an awesome artist. One of the current artists I like right now is this one. Do you guys know Bitterroot?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Green, the artist, he's amazing. He also did Power Man and Iron Fist. That series, that's how I found out about him. And this one, I picked this up just because he was working on it. I really love his artwork. It reminds me a lot of Larry Stroman. Uh-huh. Larry Stroman was an amazing artist. I just caught up with him when the last Bay Area show that was done, maybe a few months back through Steve Watt's show. So Larry was a guest. It was like, I guess, his first time coming out to California in a long time. He used to live in Oakland. He used to do the old WonderCon shows. So I had a chance to catch up with Larry Stroman, so that was cool. But this is a really, really cool one. And then as of recent, I've really enjoyed this artist, Alvera Copiel. I don't believe I'm getting his name correct, but he's responsible for this book called Magic Order, and it's through Netflix. Yeah, it's really good. He's actually he's also handling the responsibilities for Unworthy Thor as well.
Oh, one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah. So he's a French artist. He's amazing artist. So these are some of the artists I think you guys should check out, or people should check out right now. Also, Damian Scott is an amazing artist. I don't have his book with me, but he's responsible for the Batgirl series, one where she's silent and she's mute and she's not able to talk, but her abilities are totally heightened because of that aspect, which is a really amazing series. And besides that, gosh.
It's actually a cult classic, Run It Back Girl. Right. Everybody loves that Run It Back Girl.
Yeah. Another one, too, we were talking about, I guess, for current comics, 1975. It's actually done in Greek lettering, which is, this one was through Image, and this is an awesome book as well. And it's about a black character that is in fighting zombies. It's basically old heavy metal style. I love old heavy metal style. So this is one of the books that resonated with me. So hopefully, people will see this stuff and go check it out. This is stuff that I have in my library and that I go reference to, and I look at quite a bit. We were talking about early references of how I got into comics, and one of the staples that for me was this book right here. This is the original printing of Arkham Asylum.
Oh, nice.
This is the hardback edition, and this is how you know that I love this book so much. This book has the pages literally coming out of it. When I handed this years ago to Dave McKean, he was really happy because it meant that the book was being read and it meant that the book was being looked at. The pages are literally are coming out. Dave signed this for me. I got to meet Dave years ago. But this book changed my paradigm on what comics are and what comics can be. This book, along with Dave's Violent Cases, this was a big deal as well. Both of these books I took to my art teacher when I was in high school, and I said, this is what I want to do. I always knew I wanted to be an artist of some sort, but seeing Dave's work and seeing how the culmination of fine art and comic storytelling, how they can be kind of coupled together and make this amazing project was like, it totally astounded me. That was a big deal for me. Besides Dave's work on that, I think Cages is a real big deal. So people get the chance to check Cages out. I think it's a big deal. It's definitely not your general comic storytelling, but I don't look at a lot of regular types. I look at a bunch of stuff, but I love the really abstract stuff. So this is nice and abstract for me, and I really like this. This thing is obviously like almost as thick as a dictionary, you know.
And for those of you that don't know, Dave McKean also did all of the covers for the Sandman comics.
He's responsible for the Sandman covers, right?
He did Mirror Mask together and a bunch of other projects. So the two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And he's really broken the mold for me as far as art goes in comics. That same thing, Arkham Asylum, it just kind of blew my mind. I had no idea that comic art could be like that.
Yeah. Looking at the work, it's really weird because people that don't read comics, if they come on to just maybe come across it, they don't necessarily take it as a regular comic book. And for some reason, it's a nice doorway to get into graphic novels for seeing that type of stuff. I've noticed that people that don't read superhero comic books or read comic books at all, that have come across Sandman and seen his work,
right,
because it has that fine art aesthetic to it, people are been more interesting, and obviously then going into finding out about Sandman, and then that's just the rabbit hole for them.
Right.
You know,
one of us.
Yeah,
Influence is kind of my segue into some of the things I wanted to talk about. And this will require just a little bit of intro. As a kid, I came into comics looking at like George Perez and all this kind of hyper realism artists. And so it never occurred to me that I could draw comics. Then one day I was reading Frank Miller's Daredevil, and this isn't a knock on Frank at all. It isn't all. It's just say his style is not like Perez's. So I looked at Frank Miller and thought, hey, I could do that. I could be a comic book artist, you know? And so I drew Daredevil like crazy. You know, I love drawing Daredevil. And I did this for like 2-3 years as a kid. And then one day I realized that I wasn't an artist. One day I realized that my art wasn't getting any better. I still didn't look like Frank Miller. Maybe art wasn't for me. So as someone with actual artistic talent, at what point do you realize that this is something you can do, that you want to do? Like at what point does the bell ring that you say, I'm an artist, I'm going to be an artist, this is what I'm going to do? Like you're looking, let's say like the influence is the transition. So you're reading these comics, you're loving this art. At what point do you say to yourself, I could be one of those people? And then how does one, you know, embark on starting to be an artist?
I think it's coupled with a couple things. One is getting over rejection, not being comfortable about showing your work, not worrying about the critic's point of view of your work. Just paying attention to what it is that you're doing, and just worry about what it is that you like to do. Not pandering all the time to what people want you to exactly do, but just have fun doing it. That I think I always try to remind myself of going back to the things that clicked for me, made me amazed, that I want to do that. That looks cool. I want to do it. I tend to take a lot of that mentality from skateboarding. I grew up skateboarding, and so it's like trying tricks for me. I'm going to try it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, then I'm going to fall, but I'll get back up and I'll try it again. And there's a lot of that that's in skateboarding where it's a lot of risk taking. In regards to like, what is it that I have to or kind of do in order to realize that I want to be an artist? It was just, I knew I wanted to do it. When I first started out, I had a sketchbook and I had 5 prints with me when I did my first show. And I felt like I did not belong at all. And
what year was that?
This is 2007, 8. Now I had been going to shows for a long time. I've been going to Comic Con, San Diego Con, since '93.
Wow.
So kind of give you an idea of that. Obviously, a little bit older than I look, but point is that I've been going to shows for a very long time, and I knew that I wanted to do artwork. I would go and I would talk to artists, and artists would befriend me and give me lots of advice. And I didn't get the chance to go to art school maybe like a lot of other people, but what I would do is I would use my time at a convention as school. It was paid school. So for 4 days at San Diego Comic-Con, I would use it. I'm going to go talk to whomever is working on that book and ask questions, not in an annoying way, but I would also bring my work, because if you have work with you, then they're able to give you more of the feedback on what it is that you're doing. And so I would do that. I'd bring my work and I would ask questions. And what kind of changed it for me, I guess, in that I could possibly do it, was my teacher, that was a teacher at my high school, took me to one of my very first art shows or comic shows. It was at the LeBaron Hotel. I think it was an ape show. It was back in the '93. And one of the very first artists I met was Jay Lee. And a buddy of mine, a friend of mine, I was really, really, really nervous, and I had all my artwork in a portfolio. And I was nervous, and I knew who Jay was. He was working on Neymar at the time. And his name was starting to come up. And so my buddy literally like kicked me in the backside and like, go talk to him, because when are you going to be able to talk to an artist like this, right? And so I went and I showed him my work, and he was really nice and cordial, but he was honest with me. He said, you know what? You need to learn how to finish your work. If you want to do this, you need to learn how to finish your work. And it was nice. It was information I needed. I needed that feedback from another artist that was doing that job. There's something about being able to see a person doing the job that you want to do. It changes everything in your head. It breaks down the veneer of whatever you see in a book or on a page, and it lets you know that it's real, that there's work that's involved, and it takes a certain amount of work ethic in order and patience in order to do it. And I would come back and do shows and talk to people like Jay Lee and just ask lots of questions. In regards to like, when did I decide that was the right time for me? I was still nervous when I did it. I just did it. I jumped in. A friend of mine had another friend that needed half a table. And I was going to it was 2007 when I first started doing it. And I was still showing work. And they said, we have half a table for you if you want it. And I said, okay. So I showed up and I made friends with that guy and became quick friends. And then he couldn't do the rest of the show. So I got the rest of the table. He only did it one day. So I had his table. And then I met Gary Buechler and his wife, Melissa, and they ran the Comic Book Outpost in San Francisco. Gary actually runs a podcast thing called Neurotic now. He's been doing fairly well with that. But when I was at that show, his wife came over and she really liked the artwork that I had. And they were some of my first supporters as well. They're like, here, we'll give you another portion of the table. So like I had a table and some other space, and I just kind of spread out the stuff that I did have. And it was just kind of there. I just started selling my artwork. And I don't know that I was ever really comfortable at the beginning. I just started doing it. I just knew that if I didn't start, then it wasn't going to happen. And that's kind of the thing, is that there's always this thing of like, you're not too sure. And in that aspect, again, just thinking of a tricks, just see what happens, just do it. You don't really have a lot of time in order to do what it is that you want in life. You just kind of have to push yourself out there and do it. And you can't be waiting for somebody else to give you the okay in order to do that. I think a lot of people, they wait for other people's approval in order to do something. And that is going to hold you back. If you're just waiting for somebody else's approval, you're gonna hold yourself back. So skateboarding, obviously, it teaches you that because it's all of a DIY mentality. You guys play music, so you understand that. You guys, grew up playing music, and I made music on my own as well. So you do have this certain sense of like, I don't really care. I'm just going to try it, see if this works. And so I came at it with that mentality. I didn't really necessarily get comfortable with everything. I think until maybe, I don't know, maybe after the 4th or 5th year after I started selling stuff. And I'm still not comfortable doing it. Like, I'm very flattered. I'm very honored that people put their hard-earned money down on my work. I'm always very appreciative of it. And it's a privilege. I don't take it for granted at all. I know that I am, if I didn't work out what it is that I'm doing, then I'd be doing something else that I really, really hated. And so that was other things too. I've worked office jobs. I've run offices, or worked in making something, a factory, or had regular retail jobs. I know what those jobs are. I don't want to go back to that. And so that was obviously another thing that like pushed me to kind of make the transition. And so I would have a full-time job, and then after I would weed it out because I was doing art part-time, and it just kind of finally when it kind of came to, and I was able to switch them over, and I started making more money doing the work that I do, and I just finally got rid of the regular job, so to speak.
And I think a lot of people hold themselves back because they're waiting to feel more confident. They're waiting to get their work perfect, or to feel like they're ready to go. You're never going to feel ready. You're never going to be perfect. It's never going to be right, especially if you're an artist creator. There's always that extra I that you need to dot, or that T you need to cross, or that last bit of ink you need to put on the page. But if you wait for that moment, you'll never take that first step out.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, also too, I think it also helps surrounding yourself with people that are proactive or are goal-oriented people. I think that helps too. And they don't necessarily need to be doing the exact same thing that you are, but being around goal-oriented people really does help, in the sense that, like, it kind of, you're not working towards their goal, of course, but you're just kind of looking at where you're placed and how much you want to push yourself. I think in that regard, that's how that helped me. And then I just try to surround myself with really good people as best as I can, that kind of have my best interest in mind. And I've been fortunate enough in my case over the years that I've had really good people around me. And if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't have the career that I have today. And you guys are, thank you guys so much. When I first started out, you guys were carrying my stuff, and you guys would put my stuff on your guys' shelf, and that was always amazing, and it made me feel right at home at Black Cat. So I really appreciate that.
You mean
Funny you
like
should mention it.
this?
Yeah.
And this is what you did for Free Comic Day a few years ago.
I did, yeah.
Yes. He gave them out for free, and then this is some of his amazing art. If you guys don't know, Emonic stuff. And wait, more.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, it's upside down. That's funny. So you hold it upside down. So that piece in particular, my buddy's always switching it around. So I have a show manager. His name is yes, his name's Kevin, and he helps. He's my show manager, and he's always trying to flip that thing around.
I kind of like it upside down like that.
He does too.
Yeah, I'm bored like that.
He does too, and I always tell him, like, it's upside down.
That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So one time we flew together to Emerald City Comic Con.
That was a great
trip. Since live on the internet, I'm not going to discuss my Superman doll or my crippling fear of flying.
Yeah.
What I am going to discuss. What I am going to discuss is your super awesome little sketchbook. You have this little, little
red book of
mini
goodies.
sketchbook, little notebook, like everybody's seen. And okay,
That's the one.
I'm someone who has thousands and thousands of comics. I'm someone who has enjoyed looking at the art of the greatest comic guys of all time. But looking at that sketchbook on that flight was some of the most amazing experience I've had with art. Now that I've been done gushing about it, tell the parents at home why their artistically inclined kid needs to have a little sketchbook like that. Tell the parents at home, or even the parents of not artistically inclined kids like I was, but who still like to draw. Just share the importance of that.
Well, I've had the fortunate the opportunity to be teaching as of late, and I'm teaching right now on Thursday classes for middle school kids for the Arsenal. I've been doing it online, but one of the things I tell them, and one of the things I tell young artists or people that anybody that wants to get into art, and one of the things that really helped me is I try to keep the sketchbook in my pocket all the time. I try to stay off my phone as much as possible, and use the time that I have just to draw. The aspect of just drawing, not necessarily worrying about being perfect, not making sure that every single page is a finished piece, just drawing ideas, I think really helps. And the idea is to build up a visual vocabulary. We as artists, that's our job. We have to build up a visual vocabulary. We're trying to communicate with pictures. And the only way that you're able to do that is build up that visual vocabulary and putting it down in a book and just practicing it over and over and over again. And the reason I bring this out and I show young artists and why I think it's important is to build up that visual vocabulary that you're trying to have. You've got all this stuff up here that you're trying to put down on the page. When you try to do it for the project that you want to do, you get to that wall and you can't do it. This is that thing that's supposed to help you get past that wall. And so having lots of time spent in your sketchbook and not just maybe not in your sketchbook, if you don't have a sketchbook, you can just fold little small pieces of paper and put them. I used to do that too. And I still draw on several, like just loose paper and just draw. The thing is just building up that visual vocabulary and practicing. It's a skill that, and a mental muscle that you have to consistently always work out. And so I try to keep this in my pocket. I throw a pen in here and throw a little small sketchbook. I've got this one, and then I've got this one, and I've got a bunch of different other ones. And so I've got several sketchbooks. Like right now in my studio, I've got lots of sketchbooks, and sometimes I lose track of what is in what. I just know that I'm looking for that image. I got to go through and look at stuff if I'm looking for a specific image. But really, I guess what set me in that mind of having a sketchbook all the time was Baron Story. Baron Story he is the illustrator of illustrators. He's a living legend. Baron is responsible for working on Lord of the Flies. He did the cover for Lord of the Flies. He's also did stuff for Time Magazine. He's done stuff for NASA. He has artwork in the Smithsonian. Baron is still teaching. He's actually 80 years old, and he teaches at San Jose State art class. Baron is actually one of the artists that worked on the Sandman. So he's one of the Despair piece that's in Sandman. That's Baron's Story.
Wow.
So a lot of major artists such as Kent Williams, John J. Muth, just about anybody that's in Mike Dragonberg, any of the Vertigo artists or anybody that's done like a fine art style in comics has learned from Baron. Baron's that guy. So I've had the opportunity to be friends with Baron because of my buddy Ryan Graff, who manages him. And Baron has these sketchbooks, and he has a bunch of them. He has like a briefcase full of these small sketchbooks, and holding one of these things and going through it, it just, as an artist, it does something to you. And you're like, all right, I can't do this exactly, but I want to go in this direction. And that's kind of where I got that from, holding one of Baron's sketchbooks and looking at it and just watching how much it pours out of him, all of his ideas, just putting it on paper. And being at dinners with him or being in transition of going from one place to another, Baron always has a sketchbook, and he's got tons of pens here. And realizing of how valuable that is and making that connection, that's what I took from him. And so that's what I've kind of made an aspect of for myself, and I try to kind of impart onto others, and hopefully it helps them out.
What struck me about your sketchbook was how varied the style was, but it was still you. there are so many different subjects that you captured in each page. Some were pencils, some were pens, some were red ink. They were all had like the Emonic stamp on it, but they're all very different. There were some that were very soft and sweet, and others that were very, you know, kind of horrific and terrifying. Like the whole gamut and the wide array that you had was just, I was awe-inspired by what you had in that little book. You know, the range and the difference in style was just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I think the variation in style for me and why that happens for me is me being influenced by heavy metal. I grew up reading heavy metal magazine, and heavy metal magazine had a lot of European artists in it. And one in particular was Gerard Mobius. I've got a book of his somewhere right here. This is Mobius, obviously, and Mobius actually worked on Silver Surfer with Stan Lee.
I was going to say, hold that thought 1 second. Folks at home, if you can't grab a Mobius book from where you're sitting right now, you need to fix that. Because I know when I'm at home, I can pull up that Silver Surfer book he's about to show anytime I want. Yep.
These are the 2 issues that were done with Stan Lee.
Yep.
So Mobius, the big thing about Mobius was that he changed the paradigm for comics once we found out, or the States found out about him. Mike Mignola talks about this, and other people at Marvel and a lot of other companies at DC. When they saw what heavy metal was doing, they were getting really excited because it kind of broke a lot of barriers. There's not one style that's set, I feel like, for American comics. Now it's different, but back then, early 80s, late 90s, maybe, the style was just all kind of one format. And it started to kind of change with Vertigo, where the styles were more open. And I think heavy metal had a lot to do with it. A lot of artists that came across heavy metal, like myself. And Mobius was one of those artists that I didn't realize how impactful he was. I mean, not only is he a comic artist, but he's responsible for a lot of the stuff and visual aspects that we've seen in a lot of our favorite movies. Blade Runner is my favorite movie, and he's responsible for the design and inspiration for that, with Sid Mead being the concept artist. And he worked on Alien, he's worked on Tron, he worked doing a couple things for Star Wars. So, you know, he's got a big staple. Obviously, his big footprint on a movie would be Fifth Element. That's him and another heavy metal artist as well. So Mobius was a big deal for me. And back to having the different various styles, is that's where I get that from, is being influenced by a collective amount of styles and trying to have or do some of each of those things and have those disciplines. Because I feel like just doing one thing, it just gets boring after a while. You're just kind of running in the same rut.
We've got some comments. So Steve's watching. Steve Wyatt, shout out to Steve.
Oh, Steve Wyatt. Steve Wyatt is one of those people.
Steve,
yep.
You're going to be on the show next. So
yep, we're bringing Steve. You're coming on the show to talk about conventions.
Big wow and all things.
Steve's one of those. I'm one of Steve Wyatt's artists. He is one of the people that you know, he's been responsible for my career, and I have a lot to thank him and you know, Ryan Graff and Alan Spiegel, and Anthony Leano, you guys, quite a few people, but Steve has been definitely right there from the beginning as well.
So supportive, especially of local artists.
Yeah.
And thanks to Steve, I do the thing at Steve's show that you were talking about, you did back in the day. I go to Steve's shows, and aside from doing business, I get to hang out with you. I get to hang out with guys like Steve Lealoha. On and on. That guy provides guest lists like nobody in the business.
We've got another question for you, Emo. What's your favorite project you've worked on in your career, and can you show it to us? Or, yeah, can you show us?
I think I'm working on it now, and I can't show anything as of yet. I think I've shown a couple things in private.
As both the right answer, by the way. Yeah. Your favorite thing should always be what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't show it because people have to buy it. So those are always the 2 right answers.
As far as being a big thing for me was so I talked about having one of the things that people found out about my work was through the Gallery Nucleus show in Alhambra for the 20th anniversary for Sandman. I got to meet Mike Dregenberg, who was the co-creator for Sandman, and the gallery, Wade Buchanan and Ben, the guys that were running it at the time, they felt really, I think they felt really unsure with me, who I was. And my buddy Ryan Graff went to bat for me and believed that I should be there, included with these other artists. And so I have a lot of thanks to give him always for that. And they didn't think I even belonged because I hadn't been with another major gallery. And so that night I sold my painting, and that kind of just changed everything. And then, you know, Mike was asking me techniques on how I did that, and meeting Mike Dregenberg, knowing who he was, it was really, really cool. And that was a big deal for me. It was definitely a turning point.
That's rad.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Sure.
Yeah. He's got to just step out for just
We've
a
got
second.
a curbside pickup. So
We'll be right
It's
back.
good. Curbside pickups are great.
Yeah, so we've decided, you know, like you were saying with conventions, we've decided to, you know, shift and pivot a little bit on our end. We're doing virtual shopper appointments. So like this, people can basically call up and basically take the tablet around and show them the store and anything they want to look at, you know, what's in my box, what do you guys have on the shelf. So stuff that's not in our online store, we can walk around and show folks. And, you know, honestly, there's no difference being here in person versus doing it through Zoom. So keep everybody safe, keep everybody at home, and still bring you your comic shop right in the comfort of your own home.
The people that have done it have actually had a lot of fun.
Really fun.
I think, at the risk of sounding like an ass, I think they like 15 minutes of dedicated time with their comic book guy. I think it's mostly about picking my brain and just hanging out with comic book guy for 15 minutes, and it's fun for me too. It's just what you were saying at the top of the show. She's the only other person I've talked to for the last like 3 months, so it's kind of refreshing to see another human face and have some conversation about comics. So folks at home, I totally encourage you to book those appointments. It's fun to cruise around the shop. It's fun to look at the stuff that we have that's not online, and it's fun to just hang out and talk comics.
The last one you talked about Matchbox. Am I not supposed to say it?
You're not supposed to
Never mind.
say that.
Mm-mm.
See, I have projects that I'm working on
He's not
too.
supposed to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always really careful about what it is I put out. I get excited about things, and I want to post things up, and then I realize like I'm not even at the halfway point yet, so there's really no reason to do that. I feel like it's kind of like a Kickstarter. If you're not past that halfway point, you shouldn't be talking about it with everybody yet. You need to calm down and realize where you're at. And that's usually like the kid in me and getting really excited about whatever it is I'm working on. I'm like, I want to share it with other people. I want to show other things about it. But when it comes to the online situation, I'm like, you got to cool your jets just a little bit.
So how can people find you these days? How can they get your stuff?
Yeah, people can find me under Emonic, EMONIC. And
EMONIC.
And I'm on just about all the social networking, through Instagram, through Facebook, through Twitter. As of late, I haven't been posting up, just with everything going on, being as hyperbolic as it is. It's not to take, not that I don't want to post up. I've just been kind of paying attention, just like everybody else has, paying attention to what's going on. And I'll start posting up a lot more, but you know, just kind of looking at what's going on, figuring out where I fit in, and really being aware of what it is that's happening. And so I think with that, just my posts have kind of just lingered quite. I just realized like there was such a gap, and then I stayed off social networking for a time because there's a lot of stress, obviously, and so
that was a healthy decision.
Yeah, and so just for my own personal mental health, I try not to dive down the rabbit hole of what's going on so much, but just kind of keep a precursor of it and be aware. And as of late, in regards to comics, I've been just kind of rereading stuff and looking at stuff that I haven't had the chance to read, or go back to stuff like I was saying before. Like the question was like, what keeps me inspired or all the time for doing the work that I do? I go back quite often to like the stuff that inspired me when I started. One of the books that inspired me, and you were talking about Frank Miller, is Frank Miller's Ronin book.
Yeah.
This is one of those Grail books that I go back to all the time. Funny enough, my father gave me this from another friend that knew that I liked comics, but he gave them to me. I was in 3rd grade when I read this book. Now, if you know what this book is, this is not for a 3rd grade.
I was going to say, folks at home, that book's not 3rd grader appropriate.
It says on here for mature reader. Now, for the other comics, they were in singles, obviously the paperback. But yeah, when you read that, it's definitely not for a kid. But my dad didn't know any better. He just figured it was comics, so he gave it to me. And so I knew Frank Miller because I bought Wolverine, and that was the character. Spider-Man and Wolverine were the characters that got me into comics. And that's kind of the thing. I saw Frank Miller, and my dad gave it to me. I was like, oh, I know that name, from this other comic. And so I started reading it, and as I've gotten older, obviously, realizing what's in the comic, the subject matter and stuff, it changes in how you relate to it. But it's always been one of those comics I go back to, and I like it. It's so abstract, and this is reminiscent of what heavy metal is. One story type thing. It begins, it ends, and it has amazing artwork. It's really abstract and very much in the same lane as heavy metal. So I really like it.
I'm a huge fan of heavy metal too. That in 2000 AD. So do you have anybody throwing some questions out? Got just a couple of more minutes before I.
Did you want to share your Mick Gray story?
Oh, So you guys had Mick Gray as your guys' first guest, and it's nice to be following him like I was telling you guys. So Mick Gray is an inker. He is an Eisner Award inker. He worked on Prometheus with Alan Moore, and he has been in the business for a number of years. And I came across him in the early 90s. I think it was 93, my first year when I started doing shows. And I got a card from him, and I had to do a high school report, and I wanted to do it on an artist, and it had his phone number on there. So I called him, I cold called him, and I called him up, and I told him who I was. And at the end of the conversation, he ended up inviting me and 2 other friends over to his home. And that's how I met Mick. And it really broke down what it is that an inker is, and what an inker's responsibility is, and what goes into that job. And seeing his home studio set up and looking at some of the stuff was really amazing. And he was very, very nice about it. And it was very informative. And it helped me a lot understanding what it is that entails with that job. And I can't thank Mick enough for that. And every single time I see him, I'm like, hey man, how's it going? And I like I was saying earlier, I didn't realize how old he was, and everything just goes so fast. And he looks so amazing for his age, and he's still as active and just the same guy that I met when I was in high school. He's still that same guy, and energetic about comics and happy about doing what it is that he's doing. And I actually was at his house when he was inking a Jack Kirby piece. He pulled it out, and I had the opportunity to see one of these pieces that he was inking. That was a Jack Kirby piece. I can't remember necessarily what piece it was, or if in fact it was like on top of a copy. I know that he was talking about that. I don't, but I knew that it was a Jack Kirby piece. And he pulls it out, and he's like, "You want to see what I'm working on?" I was like, "Yeah." He pulls it out, and there it is, the Jack Kirby piece.
Amazing,
really
amazing.
Cool. And I think I might have also had the opportunity to see a couple of the pages for Killing Joke, and he was working on that too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You got something before I find my next one?
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're more of an independent artist. I know you totally do your own thing. But I always pitch us as the one-stop shop for all things superhero. If Marvel or DC called and said, Emonic, we do whatever book you want to do. We want to give you your book. What's the mainstream superhero title that you would jump at the chance to draw?
Oh man. I guess so. If it was Marvel, I'd go Spider-Man for Marvel, because Spider-Man was the thing that kind of segued me or got me into comics as a kid. If it was DC, everybody talks about wanting to work on Batman and whatnot. Gosh, I wish Vertigo was still part of DC.
I know.
So it would have been to work with Neil on one of the Sandman things. That's really what I would have wanted to work on. Maybe, I don't know, at some point we'll see. Maybe if they figure out what they're going to do with the Sandman, or because I know that they recently talked about it being picked up for Netflix. So maybe Sandman will have like a third wave, you know, and Vertigo will come back to some type of format that we start seeing again on the shelves. I don't know. I hope so.
I think they moved over to Black Label.
Yeah, that's what they're calling
I tell you though, if it were me, I'd have Vertigo. I'd bring Vertigo back as part of their streaming thing. And I would do things like Why the Last Man. I would do their Vertigo lineup as streaming shows, because it has its own, at least for comics, and I think they can totally turn that into TV. Vertigo was its own thing, and now that it's gone, I think even historically speaking, I think 20 years from now, Image totally does their thing and it's awesome, and everybody does their thing and it's awesome. But I don't know if we'll ever see anything like Vertigo or with Vertigo's track record.
I kind of feel it's kind of in that sense with what Marvel had with Epic Comics when they were doing their Epic line.
Yep.
You know, and I think again that harkens back to heavy metal. That stuff came out because of heavy metal. That's a result of that stuff. And in regards to like doing something for DC, I would love to, like, not doing regular Batman, but doing something that's abstract with Batman, like what Paul Pope did. Like, I'm wearing a Paul Pope shirt, I just realized. And I loved how abstract that Batman was, that year 100 that he did. Something in that case, maybe something with like Hellblazer, something that's like abstract and it's not one of the major characters. Something that I can just kind of, that doesn't necessarily already have a visual tone to it, like that can be kind of reinvented. But that's the trick too. I mean, as artists, is that if we're able to do that, is kind of change the whole paradigm of how something looks. That's why I said, like, working on Spider-Man, I would take it in a different direction of how the book looks now. We're so used to seeing it one way. I think I really love how Bill Sienkiewicz handled Elektra. You know, that what he did with that book. I love that type of style.
Yeah.
I could see you doing Justice League Dark.
Justice League Dark, yeah.
Swamp Thing.
Yeah, you know what? I would, if that. So that's the other thing too, is that if, I don't know, to convince Alan just to give me like 8 pages and I'll do a Swamp Thing. That would be cool.
That's awesome. Well, this brings us about to our hour, sir. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything from the folks at home before we start to wrap it up?
Just comments. You know, Steve's commenting about some of the folks that we mentioned. So, Steve, we're going to bring you on so you can share all of your stories. So we can't wait to hear about that.
Yes, Steve has lots of stories.
Thank you guys very much for having me on and always supporting my work. Not only myself, but a lot of us local artists that are in the area. You guys are amazing, and you guys are just an amazing couple for doing what you guys do for the area. And thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for bringing your experience and talent to the folks at home and to our little show here. We really appreciate it. And best of luck to everything you're working on. We look forward to seeing you soon. Look forward to having you back on the show when you can talk about some of the stuff as it's rolling out.
Hopefully very soon. Sooner than later.
You gotta announce it here first, and then we can sell it for you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
Take care.
it. You guys.
Thanks for watching.